oh, you're the bass player. You guy goes boom, 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 boom. Yeah, that's me.
And yeah, I had that moment of like, well, should I try and be a guitarist in my small band in the UK, or should I jump on board this train that seems to be, you know,
heading out of town.
Yeah, exactly.
This instrument can be so many things, both as an instrument and as a concept. It was probably, the first time I met Sheldon Dingwall was probably about 22 years ago, I think, at a NAMM show out in Los Angeles. And for those that don't know, it's the National Association of Music Manufacturers, I believe. Is what the NAMM is an acronym for. But I normally, like at those shows, there's like so many, you know, builders and so many stuff. I never pick up a bass at those things. People are, you know, play my instrument, and you go, no, because first off, it's not an environment for listening to evaluate anything.
Right.
And it seems like if you do it, a crowd will gather and expect you to impress them. And my playing is not impressive. My playing starts when I'm at a gig, I'm not a jammer kind of a guy. But Sheldon was different. He was this young kid, really. And he came up to me just carrying a bass like this with a cord wrapped around it, no case or anything. And he said, would you try my bass? And I looked at it. And of course, with these basses, the first time you look at them, you don't really notice the fan fretting on it. You're just kind of looking at, and then you suddenly, wait a minute, what's with this? So I said, explain to me what this is all about. And he told me about Ralph Novak's and his fan fret concept. And it made total sense because I came to music as a pianist. So the whole idea of the low strings being longer than the high strings made total sense to me, rather than packing everything into the same string length and dealing with, you know, windings and stuff, trying to accommodate that. And I plugged it in, and I just, as soon as I went, where are we here? And I heard that, I just went, we have to talk, you know, because at that time, and it still is, but there was really a lot of it at that time, was I was replacing synth bass on a lot of records where they had done pre-production, and so the keyboard player, whoever was doing it, would put up a temp bass on it. And it seems like everybody that does those tends to really sit down at the bottom of the keyboard. Mm. And I really needed a bass that could read there, rather than having, you know, just all even, and then suddenly you have, and most of the 5 strings really didn't have a clarity. So I just I immediately hooked up with Sheldon, and I've been with him ever since. And then at a certain point, he approached me about he would like to try a signature model. And so we looked at all the little, because we kept refining over the years. He'd call me up and he'd send me a prototype for some new thing and say, what do you think on this? And it was, for me, it was like when we did these, I said, well, I use mandolin frets on all my basses. And so he had never done that before, so he incorporated those. Things like when you need to change batteries on most basses, on most instruments, you're sitting there, you know, and you're getting your fingernail under the edge trying to lift it out, and it's
never
magnets.
It's never a convenient time, is it?
No, it isn't. And you've got magnets here, so done. Same thing, having just this little notch here. If you have to get in and access your controls, you just lift it up at the edge here. I mean, it is a smart instrument. In my heart of hearts, I'm still a 4-string guy. So this string is there when I need it, but I still think of this being the bass for me. But if there's one song with one note that needs a 5-string in the show, I play 5 for the whole show, because I don't want the front of house guy to have to deal with multiple EQs, multiple channels, so I don't have, you know, a couple of different basses on stage. And I find that these things are really remarkable in their versatility. And one of the things I enjoy so much is looking at the YouTube channels of guys demonstrating their Dingwalls. Mm-hmm. And I've seen you on there. I've seen like so many guys, and this one instrument can do so many things. It's not a one-trick pony. So when I hear metal guys playing, and I hear country guys playing, and fusion guys playing, it's that same instrument, but you can pull so much character out of it that it's something. I'll be playing this for the rest of my life. which could be an hour, but it might be another 30 years. Who
Hopefully,
knows?
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's so many like similar points that I'd like to bring up about my relationship to Dingwall and what drew
so
me
how
to
did
it.
you, how did you get started with them?
I mean, just before I get to that, I'd love to know, for example, where did the mandolin fret thing start?
Okay, this goes way back. In 1973, there was a place in Los Angeles called Westwood Music, and it was like the watering hole for all the musicians. Anytime Fred Wallachy, it was a multi-generational music store. But anytime you stopped in there would be Jackson Browne, there'd be guys from Poco or anything. There was a room in back where guys would jam and play and stuff. It was a really vibrant music store. But there was a guy named John Carruthers who was the repairman there. He's been an independent guy for years because Westwood closed down eventually. But I don't know how I came upon it. But at some point, I ended up with a 1962 or 3, we weren't sure if it was 2 or 3, precision neck, Fender precision neck.
Just neck.
No bass, nothing, just this neck. And it sat around for a little while, and I took it in one day and showed it to John, and John Carruthers, and he said, let's build a bass. You got this neck. Now I said, I hate precisions. I really like a jazz bass because my first real bass after a couple of like cheap Japanese basses was a 62 jazz bass. So what we did was I brought in my 62 jazz bass and we made a template off the neck. And then we reshaped the precision neck to be a jazz neck. Well, in doing so, we had to pop the frets on it. So we did that, and I was walking around the shop looking at things while he was doing this, and I saw this fret wire hanging on the wall, and it was mandolin wire. And I said, what's this? And he goes, it's mando wire. I said, let's try that.
And what was your thought? Why?
I just, for some reason, because ever since I first started playing, I do a lot of glisses where I can almost, with this kind of fretting and a light action, especially when it dresses down a bit, it can sound just like you're playing fretless on it. And it just appealed to me. It wasn't anything. It wasn't an aesthetic or anything. It just seemed like this could be worth trying. And he said, I don't think it'll work. And I said, well, if it doesn't work, I'll pay you for another fret job and we'll just do some mediums or jumbos, whatever you think is right. So he assembled, Carruthers assembled this whole thing. And it's one of those things where when you're experimenting like that, you kind of go, it could suck or it could be great. And as soon as we went, and I started listening to it, and I went, it's unbelievable. And I play hard, and I wiggle a lot on it. So they've held up where his feeling that it wasn't going to work was fine. And having the hip shot was great because it was a time where I was still working with James Taylor, and songs like Mill Worker and Country Road were all in drop D tunings. So to be able to just, you're in D rather than sitting there and tuning, and there were no clip-on tuners at that point. So you're making noise, but also trying to depend on your ear for your tuning. So that became, it was just one of these things. All these little pieces came together on it. And so I have every bass I've got has Mando frets on it. And,
do you remember if that Dingwall that Sheldon came to you with at the NAMM show had small frets? Because these are, I believe, are banjo frets.
Yeah, they were.
The rest of the range.
They were probably like that.
They were like this, because even that's quite small for a bass.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm kind of jumping all over the place.
No.
I know that coming from guitar,
Yeah.
playing a Dingwall for the first time, I was like, this is so playable in the way that a guitar is.
Yeah.
And realizing later how, when you've got such thick strings and necessarily slightly higher action than on a guitar, those like fractions of a millimeter saved on the frets actually make the neck feel so much smaller, just that little bit of extra height. So it's fascinating to hear that that's something which works so well for you kind of in between the kind of fretless and fretted sound, but also just, the playability in general of all of the Dingwalls.
And the profile on his necks is really nice for a 5-string. They are so playable, where some are really tubby and clunky and they're not comfortable to play. Where these are, the minute I picked one up, and it's interesting. I mean, people always say, well, how long did it take you to get used to the fan fretting? And I said about 2 minutes, maybe. I said it was natural. I said the only thing that was ever a little strange is like if you look down, like it's your dot there, but you realize your fingering is a back cut from that. So then I said, well, that can be an issue. So don't look. Yeah. And also, if you're up here too much, then you need a bass player. You know, on most of the gigs that I do, because that's suddenly where's the bottom end. This is, to me, it's an exquisite instrument, both in its playability and in the way it's manufactured, and just adventures and finishes and all that. It's I've got one of my first ones with him was Candy Apple Red Metal Flake. And it's in the MIM Museum in Phoenix, the Music Instrument Museum.
Oh, wow.
He contacted me and he said, would you put a bass in this? They're doing a Dingwall exhibit.
Oh,
and I said, sure. And I said, this is the flashiest one, so let's put that in there. And it's been there for, I think, at least 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
And but I've got a number. I've got 3 of these out on the road right now. The one for the show, a backup one, and then I have one that I take to the hotel room because I'm doing a lot of recording while I'm on the road. So I've got that one there, and then I've still got a couple in Los Angeles because I ended up with prototypes for the signature model, and they're all great, you know.
Yeah.
So it's nuances, but I love the idea of an instrument that if I only had one of these and I was on tour and something happened, I could contact him and they could send one out immediately, because to me, the off-the-shelf instruments are as good as anything I've got.
And that is an off-the-shelf one you're holding right now, isn't it?
And you know, so there are times where people have, you know, done a signature model or something, and other guys get them and they go, oh, I get it. So for you, they really did it up. And then now for like the general consumer, it's not as good. I said, not with these. I said, I would do the biggest gig in the world right now and walk in there into the factory and just pick one off the shelf. And I said, I'd be happy with it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much to talk about, isn't there? Like how our preferences and setup go. But yeah. I mean, to conclude that point, I think Sheldon obviously is such a champion for both of us in that way. You know, his mind seems constantly consumed with how to maintain and increase the quality of things.
Yeah, no, it always seems to be moving forward on it. And the thing that was great is on the tour I just came off of, I mean, I tuned up for a show, and every night I'd go out and check my tuning, and it was dead on tuning for like a week. In there, it's like you go, because sometimes halfway through the show you're already losing it. And these things, they are so stable, and they're so strong, yet they don't feel clunky. You know, where some feel like you're really just beating it to death trying to get something out of it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But they're exquisite, the workmanship and the thought that goes into it. And
I like about the pickup position. Sorry to interrupt, because that looks closer to the bridge in terms of those 2 pickups. And since you were talking about the P-bass orientation, I've got a feeling you might have done that as some kind of...
Well, it was interesting. At one point, most of my early ones were the 2 pickup ones.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he sent me one. He said, I'm trying a 3 pickup.
Yeah.
One. Now for my, like there's a lot of guys are, one of the things that drives me crazy at a gig is if I see a guy playing and he's constantly fucking with their knobs. Don't touch it, just play. And I tend to, with mine, I have this would be my setup.
Do you know
what I do is the volume up, I take the treble all the way up, mids all the way up, and then just roll them back about a few cents. Same with the bass. I roll that back, and then I use the setting on the I don't really use the switch at all. I have it full on, everything's on. And that, for me, that sound seems to work on all the gigs I do, no matter what the genre is. So once the show starts, I don't ever touch anything. The only thing I touch is the volume, and it's like at the end of a song, I just fade it out rather than, and that's the only thing I ever use the knob for, is that, because I don't have a pedal board or any pedals or volume control there.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful instrument, and I feel really fortunate that he came up to me at that NAMM show, and we started a relationship, and it just gets better every time I see him.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I mean, just to talk about some of the things that's similar, like I came up playing piano as well. Like I played piano from a very young age, and I had in my head, because I knew that you did, to ask you whether that background in piano maybe could have been part of the reason why the fan fret technology kind of made sense to you, because it is a bit of an alien thing for people that kind of look at this more like a big guitar rather than like its own
Yeah.
instrument. But I think that if you understand, have experience of how the low strings on a piano, especially like a grand piano,
Yeah.
sound and how
It may
coherent
have,
it is.
it may have, but without initial thought to it, because when we started talking, we almost immediately got into like the whole idea of because people ask me about, is it a tuning thing? I go, no, it's really tempering the instrument. But it made total sense to me. And, my ear was attuned like you as a pianist. You're used to that register and that the vibration of that.
And the present overtones. Because
Yeah.
I got into bass quite late. I just joined a metal band. I was a guitarist up till that point. I needed to find my instrument. And the band actually had a couple of loaner basses from a couple of different companies. And all of them sounded great on the top four.
Yeah.
And I should add the band I was playing in, this is Periphery, my old band, tune's low. Like, unlike you, I'm playing the lowest string 90% of the time.
Yeah.
That could be down, not even B, like an A flat would be a typical tuning, or even lower down to like F sharp or something like that. So really, really low. And it was just stupid when you had four strings that sounded brilliant and overtony and piano-like, and then just like a wet kind of thump on the bottom.
Horrible.
So, the Dingwall stuck out to me also because of the playability. Like you said, a 5-string feels really compact.
Yeah.
You can have a low action. They're always, beautifully made so that the action can be low without excessive kind of fret buzz.
Yeah.
And for me, what I needed was a workhorse instrument, which it sounds like to me is a lot of what you've created in yours as well. And those kind of functional elements.
There's
nothing
nothing flash.
No, but
it's a beautiful. It's a flash instrument. It's beautiful, but I needed a tool for work.
Yeah.
And this really fit the bill. And I've gone through, like I had Yamaha TRB series and BB series and different ones. This is the one that just for me said I'm home. And the thing, like I was saying earlier, that I find fascinating with them, though, is when I watch videos on YouTube of guys playing in all different genres, and there they are with their Dingwall, and they all sound different, yet it's the same instrument. There's nuances within the different models within the company. Yeah. But for the most part, it's an incredibly versatile instrument.
In many ways, I feel like it's kind of just correcting an inherent flaw with like the 5-string. Like, when you have like a photo that's taken with a slightly wide lens and everything's a bit distorted around the edges, and then you can kind of in Photoshop, or you can flatten it out and you're like, oh, now the perspective's right. I can see everything properly. It's kind of like that kind of feeling where the core instrument of the instrument, the core sound of the instrument isn't completely different to anything else out there, but it's just so kind of coherent through the whole range.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting on that level. And I just, at this point, it's really kind of hard to imagine not playing it when I'm on the gigs. And I have so many people that come up to me afterwards and they go, God, bass sounds amazing. What is it? Yeah. And then, I said, it's a Dingwall. And they go, Dingwall? I said, yeah. I always wished I could have introduced Sheldon to Molly Ringwald, and she could have married him and been Molly Ringwald Dingwall. But, I just, it's up in Saskatoon, Canada, and all this, give them the whole rundown about him. Yeah. But bass players, they all come up and they just go, man, what is that instrument you're playing? And it's one of those things you're never reticent about saying what it is, because you're really proud of it. I'm really proud of what he's created with this company.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and
I'd love to talk a bit. You were saying earlier how you play with a high action. Could you kind of talk a little bit about that? Why?
Well,
how?
When I started playing piano when I was 5 years old, and I don't think of it, but it's that kind of proverbial child prodigy, because by the time I was 8 years old, I had won awards from the Hollywood Bowl Association, and I had met Eugene Ormandy, the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And and I was only classical. I knew nothing except classical music. And when I got into junior high school, when I was 12 years old, I kind of cockily walked in and I said, your piano player's here. And the music teacher said, 50 kids play piano. We need a string bass player. And he went to the back room and pulled out this old K blonde plywood upright. and he showed me how to hold it. And at this point, I was burned out with piano.
Okay.
I had done all these recitals. I was constantly under stress, and I was like already seeing a shrink when I was 12 just because of stress. And what I think it was the piano teacher that I had at that point was probably living her lack of success through mine. So she was telling my parents, oh, he's amazing and all this. So I was like just being, I was a workhorse. Yeah. So I was kind of ready for something else to happen without ever having said it. Yeah. And as soon as he showed me how to hold that upright and I plucked a note on it and felt the vibration of that, I just looked at him, I said, let's do it.
Wow. I mean, because
and I never went back to
perspective,
piano.
You might have 50 kids, but they're probably not at the level that you are playing piano. Like, if he was making a team selection, he should have probably been like, you guys all go learn to play bass.
Yeah, but in junior high, they just wanted people to have opportunities at that point. It really didn't matter because I was not going to be playing at the level I was in a junior high school orchestra at the level I was trained to do at that point. So the bass, as soon as I felt that, I just went, I'm ready for something different. Yeah. And he gave me some basic instructions on how to play it. Then I ended up with a teacher named Paul Tenegas, who was pretty good. But then I ended up with a teacher named Nat Gangursky, and Nat was like one of the premier studio bassists in Los Angeles. And
this is upright bass.
Yeah, upright bass. So I really dedicated myself to that. And then the hard part was I was always in bands. And until I finally went electric, I was like flogging a dead horse out there. You know, you can't be heard. Your fingers are bleeding because you're trying to play with the drummer and an electric guitar player. And
how are you carrying it around?
You're just lugging it. I had an MG, and I would drive around with this bass sticking out of it. But my dad, when I was about 15, I guess, there used to be a music store in the Musicians Union in Hollywood. And he took me there, and he bought me an amp and a bass. I bought a melody bass from Japan and a St. George amp. And suddenly I was a contender in the bands. I could be heard. Yeah. And it took a little while to transition from that to this, but I fell in love with it. And, and then I was a huge McCartney fan, but who could afford a Hofner? So I got an Echo. Bass, you know, because it looked like a violin bass. Right. I had a few different basses, but then I had an opportunity. This guy had a 62 jazz bass for sale for $90, and it was mint. Had all the cover plates, the felt mutes, all that stuff, and I ended up getting that, and that was really for me a game changer. It was a legitimate instrument, and the sad part for me was, when I started really actually working, they weren't looking for doublers on those dates. So I was not getting any calls for upright. It was all electric. Yeah. So my upright chops went away on that, because I mean it isn't riding a bicycle. You know,
is it the physicality of it mostly?
It's the physicality more than anything. I miss bowing. I mean,
I was going to ask if you ever played with a bow.
Oh yeah, no, I love bowing. I mean, for pits, you know, on this, fine. You know, I love pits on an upright, but the bowing is what I really missed more than anything. But I was working so much that I just thought, I can't stop and like get my shit back together again on the upright. And there was so many great upright players, and like Chuck DeMonico and Chuck Berghofer in LA, that I just wouldn't, when somebody would call me and say, can you do upright? I'd go, you know, or you know, John Patitucci. And I go, no, call them. I'd rather not embarrass myself at that point. But
I guess the physicality.
So what it was I was coming to this from the standpoint of an upright. Yeah. So I was used to high action and really digging in. So when I'm playing something with really low action, I'm not as accurate with it. And plus, a lot of the stuff that I play on, there's a lot of ballads, a lot of, you know, or like arena rock, you know, kind of Foreigner, Journey kind of stuff. And there's a lot of, you want to ring some nice whole notes, and the lower the action is, the quicker it decays on you. So I really love having that high action. When I dig in and put a little wiggle on it, it'll sit for ages. Right. And that really all came from the upright background, I think.
So do you dislike if your tone has a bit of that kind of like fret smack in it, if you know what I mean? Like, do you not want any of that, or?
Oh, it depends on the song.
Okay.
You know, I don't mind. I've dug in on stuff where I'm making a ton of noise, and
Okay.
I still end up doing projects where I'm like driving total distortion, pushing distortion both from a DI or from, an outboard, pedal or something.
Yeah.
But in general, most of the stuff they want from me is clarity.
Yeah.
And because a lot of times when I'm sitting at home, I'll plug in, I got boxes of pedals and all kinds of crap, and I'll sit there and like just do Hendrix stuff on it. And, so, and then I go to the session and they go, they just want that nice and clean. So to me, everything that I work on is predicated on the song. And if the song wants it to be dirty, or sometimes I'll do something where I'm like really keeping like either the treble completely cranked off, or I'll stuff foam rubber in it and make it sound like an old P bass.
Right.
But it's all predicated on the song, what it wants of me.
It's funny.
I don't mind.
Parallel between you and your approach to music and what the bass is, and the point of the bass are like.
Yeah, we
meet
meet somewhere in the middle sometimes. But it really is that. But I'm not adverse to like really dirty sounds and stuff. And I've done all kinds of stuff, with them where I've played them with Dremel tools and all that stuff. I mean, you just kind of do whatever's needed on it. And sometimes that's the most fun for me, is when you're stepping out of your comfort zone or what their expectation is of you.
Yeah.
And I did, like, there was an album that I did. There was an Australian artist, Billy Thorpe, and he had a thing called Children of the Sun. And we did that as a power trio. And all my bass, I did all this stuff, but I also had a Carl Thompson piccolo bass. So I doubled everything on piccolo on it. And because I like doing that more than having an 8-string.
Sure.
Because I could have solid bass, but then put some effect on the piccolo.
Yeah.
Or detune it. If you were working with tape, you could detune the tape slightly, so it gives it more of a chorusy effect.
Ferris speed it. Yeah.
But again, that's not working on a country record. So every time you do something, you look at what's needed for that. And one of the things that I'm not good at, because I never played guitar, I've always come from bass, is I've tried it, and I've never spent the time to really be good at it, is pick playing. And I'm sitting here watching you play with a pick, so we all have our own things that we do. And that's the thing that to me is always fascinating, because playing bass isn't one trick pony. It's whatever, you're working in the metal field, and I've done some metal records, but it's not what I normally get called for.
Sure.
And I have fun when I get to go do it.
Okay.
But when I watch videos of guys that's their bread and butter and they're doing it, this instrument can be so many things.
It can,
both as an instrument and as a concept.
Yeah.
And so I'm always really appreciative of watching other guys play. I love going to gigs and watching other bass players.
Yeah.
I never sit there going, that sucks, or I could do that, but I just really enjoy watching other people play.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like part of that mindset is tied up in being a good bass player as well. Like, I think we were talking, off camera before about how you are aware of what everybody's doing when you're playing in a band in a way that maybe other instrumentalists are more focused on what they're doing. So it kind of makes sense that you'd be so open to kind of watching and appreciating what the people are doing.
I remember, I forget how long ago it was. It was probably maybe 8 or 10 years ago. Bass Player magazine would give like a Lifetime Achievement Award every year. They would give like 2 of them out. Yeah. And so one year they were giving it to me and to Tony Levin. Okay. So we went back I had to fly back to New York for it. And I told him, I said, look, I'm just flying back for this thing. I'm not playing, I'm not doing anything. I'll come back and be a part of the evening. But I said, I'm not. And then Tony shows up with he's in New York, so his band is there. Yeah. So they're doing a whole set and all this stuff. And I just kind of, when they gave me mine, I just kind of went, thanks, I guess. Well, at the end of the evening, they always have like a big bass jam, which to me is the most grotesque thing there is. I hate it. And it looks like the end of a bodybuilding contest, and all the guys are flexing and pushing each other out of the way. Everybody's up there. And they said, at least could you just come up and start Stratus? Just come up and go. I said, okay, but I don't have a bass. So they give me Stu Ham's bass. Well, his actions half again as low as this.
Yeah.
That lick is so hard to play on low action. On high action, I can play it all day. And I'm sitting up there and I start the thing and I go, this is great. I just got a Lifetime Achievement Award and I sound like a monkey that just found a bass in a closet that just dropped acid. And I'm going, I sound so shitty up here, and I'm the guy they're celebrating. It was the worst evening. And then
man.
I got through like 4 bars of it and I just handed the bass off and I walked off and let the guys all up there pose off with each other. But, it's just one of those things where you just go, man, this is so. For me, the only thing that would one of the things why I don't like to go to clubs where they say, well, let's just jam and you could use the bass player. So suddenly you've got a strap where the bass is like this.
Yeah.
You've got action that's too low to play.
Right.
And all that. So I go, no, I don't think so. I like to feel in charge of me.
Sure.
And with that kind of stuff, but
I mean, there's so much intent and craftsmanship between what behind what you do when you're doing your job as a bass player, that it doesn't just feel like something that you just muck around with on stage.
Take
some
it
kind of
real
slightly...
serious. As much fun as it is, it's serious, and you are the glue that's holding everything between the drums and the melody together.
Yeah.
And you can direct the song. You leave that root and you go to some other little colors in there and all of a sudden that sounds really different.
Yeah.
And nobody knows why. And they go, oh, you're the bass player. Your guy goes boom, 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 boom. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, Thank you. So.
Show me that Stratus lick. How do you play that? Because I'm rubbish with my fingers. I've never... So you're doing like a drag between...
Yeah.
And do you start with your middle or your index when you do it?
Probably my middle. Just because everything I do is this. Then it goes.
Yeah. I mean, your technique is so precise dynamically as well. I'm wondering, because I know there was like a period where you started and the Wrecking Crew came in and did that first record.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're with them a couple of years later.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if in that time you really woodshetted like your
it
tonal
seems,
consistency.
I've heard the demos that we cut in the band that I was in before I was ever in the studio. And it's the same playing back then. I mean, I just, whatever I was doing, it's like it's been consistent. And it was interesting. I was with Steve Bailey in Germany. It was a tribute to John Lord. He had passed, and so they were doing a thing. So they had a bunch of different guys contributing to it, and they asked me if I would do a bass part for it. And so Steve had a remote unit with him. So I said, would you record this for me? And so we did it. And he looked at me afterwards. He said, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, because he was looking at the meter and he says he's so used to watching spikes, and he says yours is just like, he says it's just like the most consistent thing ever. And it's nothing I think about. It's just the nature of how I play. Because I never have engineers use compressors or limiters. Unless it's something very specific that needs something, especially if there's something where I want hit a note and have it ring for 6 bars or 8 bars, then you have to do something with that. But just stylistically, the kind of work I've been called for, it's pretty much all the same playing. Like when I change genres, I don't really change what I'm playing. It just somehow, it's more the actual part that I'm playing that fits the genre rather than the physicality of playing it.
Because I mean, it rings so true with me as well. Consistency, coming as a producer into playing bass, I realized that you really need to play as, like, exactly as you're describing, as dynamically even as possible, because you're the root note of everything. And if your dynamics are all over the place and that root note is changing a lot, and
nothing lays well then.
No. Whereas the opposite's true. If you play it consistently, then actually stuff can change quite a lot on top, and it always has this super solid foundation.
Well, it's like when I started working with Phil Collins, when we did the, in '85, we went out and did the No Jacket Required tour. And because they were gating the drums and all that, because that was the signature sound for Phil. Keyboards had effects on them. Daryl Sturmer's guitar had effects on it. And they originally, they had some stuff going on. And I looked at the sound guy and I said, would it be cool if I, first off, didn't go wireless? I still believe in hardwire.
Okay.
So I said, if I'm hardwire and no effects, and he just went, thank you. Because just like the parts being consistent, having a sound that is solid in there, all that other stuff sounded great. But if I would have had like effect on the bass and doing, chorusing or anything like that, everything would have been wobbling.
Yeah.
On it. So I as much as I love plugging in devices and playing around with them, and like I said, I have lots of them. When I go out on a tour, I'm the guy that's absolutely straight, and everything else is lays. And I listen to board mixes of shows, and I go, I can hear every note. It's not elusive, especially if you have really a good front of house guy.
Yeah. And again, it's that bass player mentality of like, you kind of. It's almost better if no one notices you because you're so constant. You know what I mean? Like you're just so part of the foundation of it.
The only people noticing are the bass players in the audience. Sure, The funniest gig I think I ever played was I was with Billy Cobb, and we were doing the 30th anniversary of Spectrum, and so it was a crazy thing. It was just 4 of us, and we did, I think, 18 shows in 16 days. It's like it was slamming, and it was hard. We were doing 2 sets a night at all these clubs. But we're singing a club in upstate New York, and the club was probably about, where we were playing was probably about the size of this carpet and maybe the couches. I mean, it's tinier. And there's a guy sitting in front of me, and I look down, and he's got binoculars, and he's watching me like this. He's like almost this close. And I go, what is he looking at? Like nose hair, your cuticles? But I'm the whole set. He's like this.
Wow.
He was just watching me play. It freaked me out.
That's some
really
passive
weird.
Aggression kind of.
It was weird. It was really weird.
But he was studying your technique, was he?
I guess he was. I don't know. Maybe a lunatic trying to figure out where my jugular was so he could like get a ray. I don't know. There's some crazy people in this world.
True.
But it's just so, the thing for me is I've always loved the psychology of the bass. I love the seat of responsibility that it occupies, how much you can really actually control the music that's coming off the stage, where people aren't, like you say, aren't aware of it.
Yeah.
But it is this thing that's really creating a bedrock for everything.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you don't have to be the guy out front, like strutting his stuff out there. You can have maybe those moments where you step out. And I'm not a solo guy. I mean, I've done a couple of solos in my life on records, but for the most part, I always go, you could play another song in the time that the bass solo is going to take up. So it's just not where other guys I know, because the wealth of players like out in LA is just crazy. And there's so many of those bass players there. They can't wait to get to the solo part of it. And it's like going to the NAMM show. Yeah. And you walk by a booth and there's a guy sitting in there and he's got a placard and says, world's fastest bass player. And it's really cool for about 30 seconds. And then you just yawn and move on. So, for me, I really like songs. I really like playing songs. And
I mean, the comment that's in my head actually was you pointing out about how you wanted an instrument that could replicate basically what the synth bass was, these demos that producers might be doing. And like everything we're talking about, like they're not playing bass solos with that. That's root notes.
They're playing bass parts.
And it's super consistent, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I'm kind of really just curious with any musician, how they get to that level of refinement in their craft. Like in terms of the consistency of your performance, were you hearing synth bass at some point and going like, I need to sound...
No.
Okay.
No, because I think I had pretty much defined how I play bass long before synths were even. I mean, when I was starting to play, I would be playing with a B3 organ in most of the bands. There was a B3 or Fender Rhodes or maybe a Wurlitzer, and maybe an ARP string ensemble or something like that. But it was still mostly primitive keyboards until the synths like DX7s and started coming in. So I think I had pretty much created my own concept of how I play, which I never thought about, but it just happened through playing.
That's interesting.
So I don't think when the synths came along, all it did was just make me kind of cognizant of first off of register, because they could reach notes that the bass, especially as a 4-string,
Yeah.
could not. And that Frankenstein bass that we built, that I could drop that E string to a C on it, and it held up. It's just the instrument itself is so solid.
Yeah.
So that always worked for me on that. But having the 5-string, I had a 6-string at one point, and to me it was, I wasn't playing in a manner that required that. I mean, it was great for staying within one little spot. But as soon as you go up there again, you need a bass player.
Sure.
You're in another stratosphere at that point.
No,
But the
what about timing? I'm sure that your timing is impeccable. I'm sure that if you saw your performance, level completely even, timing, completely.
Yeah, if I can do. I mean, normally when I play, if we start something with a click and they shut the click off and they turn it on at the end, it'll be still with a click.
And is that something you worked on, or is that just repetition?
It's just the way. And I tend to think, even on a really slow ballad, I tend to subdivide in 16th notes in my mind.
Yeah.
So I've got this pulse going. So I really, and then depending on the song, that'll let you know where to lay the note. And certain songs, even when you're doing that, it's sitting back a little bit. So you'll sit in, and other times you're going to dig in a little bit. And these nuances are, that big.
And are you doing it intuitively? And
it's all intuitive.
At the same time, you're like, oh, I'm kind of pushing this. It kind of feels like it needs it, but you're not.
Oh, no. I mean, no, that would be part of the intuition.
Right, okay.
Where you're doing something and no, this needs to dig in a little bit. You're not going to leave it. And in the old days, when I would work with drummers like the great Carlos Vega or, Jeff Porcaro, they could sit with a click going, and they weaved around it, so you never knew there was a click on those songs because they kept it so organic on it. Where with a guy like John Robinson, JR, and they are on the beat. It's really solid, and they're known for that. That's why he's on Michael Jackson records and all that, because that's what they want. But on the stuff that really breathes, you have those nuances, but they're all real subtle. But for me, one of the things for me is it's always weird. I'm not sure how to word it. I don't play intellectually, where like when we do a track, I kind of go into a zone when I'm playing, and I'll never play it again the same way. And the worst thing that happens to me is we do something and then, could you double it? Oh, God. And something that just flowed, now we're punching in bar by bar.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea what I just played. So I always kind of dread that, or I'll listen to it in advance and go, do you think you might want to double this, so that I can then create a part that I can remember?
Sure,
But usually I'm like in a zone where other guys I know in LA, man, they could just play the same part all day long.
Do you think it's because it's essentially fragments that they're putting together in different ways depending on the session?
It could be. It could be. But for me, I really, I don't want to sound metaphysical, but it's almost like an out-of-body experience. When that red light comes on, I go into another space, and I'm responding physiologically at that moment to things. And if suddenly an hour later you're cutting a track, and they go, let's take a break, let's go eat lunch, and we'll come back.
You're not going to respond.
Death. I mean, it's a completely different thing. Your blood pressure's different. Your thought process is different.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. So I always try to finish things before we move on.
Sure. I love the meta stuff. I wanted to ask you about one thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I'm a pretty well-studied musician.
Yeah.
I played various instruments. For me, sight reading has always been my Achilles heel. And I started young on the piano with sight reading, jumping on a stave on the floor with other kids and stuff like that, and flashcards and exams, and it never stuck. I could never make the link that I know I make with reading words. I can read words on a page and I don't even think about it. There's just sentence forming almost audibly in my head.
Yeah.
Is that what it's like for you when you're reading a score? Is it just like reading words?
Yeah.
You can just
for me, the reading music was never a problem, and I was fortunate it came from piano, because there were times when I'd be on sessions and they would have a score for me, and they would have copyists would have screwed up and written it in treble clef or tenor clef,
Yeah.
and I could still read them. It was a bit of a struggle, but I might have to like pencil in a couple of notes just because I'm getting up on stavs that,
Sure, yeah.
you know, I'm going, where is that headed, you know? But for the most part, and the thing that was good for me with that was that when I started doing studio work, unlike the other guys that I was working with who weren't readers, all of a sudden when people knew I could read, I was getting called for jingles in movies, and I did tons of television.
Yeah.
So it opened up a lot of avenues. So I had a pretty wide berth. It's like we just did, when the Grammy Awards are on, there's a Grammy pre-show that goes on during the day before the actual Grammy Awards. It's what they should televise, because in the evening show, they give out like 8 awards and it's all these big well, in the daytime show, they give out 80 awards.
So there's audience.
And we have 90 pieces of music for it, and we are slamming through the whole thing. And it is exhilarating and fun. And you're going through this book that looks like a huge phone book of songs, and you're doing everything, you know, from Kiss to Sinatra in it. And so but everybody's a power reader in it, because you can't make mistakes, because there's no coming back on it.
No, and is it a different mode of playing for you when you're reading?
Well, it's a different mode from the standpoint that if I'm doing a project where I'm not reading, I'm creating the part in my head. When I'm reading, I'm just interpreting what's on the page. So it takes the responsibility of coming up with a part, because the part's already defined. And a lot of times what they'll say is, make it yours. Okay. So you've got the outline as the chart, but like it might just be saying, you know, go from, but I might go, you know, and just put a little schmutz on it of my thinking.
Yeah, a delivery rather than note choice.
Yeah, okay. But it's pretty well defined, especially like when you're doing TV and movies, because everything's, you know, the video's all been cut and everything, and you have to hit points, so you don't have the luxury of kind of messing too much. Right. But you can throw some little personality things in it, and that the composers usually appreciate, and they want you to bring you to it. They've hired you and they'd like to hear you, but the part's already there. Yeah. So let me ask you then, so you were a guitarist. Yeah. And so what was it that made you switch over to bass at this point?
Necessity. Opportunity to join a band that seemed to be on the cusp of doing something very cool.
Okay.
Was fine for guitarists. They had 3 of them.
Oh, okay.
Lost a bassist. I'd been in the studio with them working on the record. They were about to start touring. I'd ended up playing bass on the record.
Oh. Okay.
And I guess I was quite consistent with the pick, because when I played the bass, you know, we could have had the guitarist doing it, but when I did it, it kind of sounded more even in the kind of way that we're talking about. And yeah, I had that moment of like, well, should I try and be a guitarist in my small band in the UK, or should I jump on board this train that seems to be, you know,
heading out of town?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it didn't take too long to make the decision, but it was a bit like, I've invested a lot into guitar.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean you're never going to play guitar.
No,
it means you're in a situation where you're playing bass now, but you can still be writing and doing whatever you want to do with the guitar.
As did happen, but I mean, that was one of the better choices I've made, really.
That's great.
I met Sheldon very soon afterwards, and this whole journey began, you know. So
that's really great, though.
The bassist that was playing before me in Periphery was playing a Dingwall.
Oh, okay.
So and that was one of my first experiences of even playing bass. I actually filled in for him. I had no idea that bass was going to become quite a big part of my life. But they asked me, since I knew the songs, he was going on his honeymoon, first major tour they ever did, I played his Dingwall.
Okay.
And that, you know, in my head was like, wow, this is a bass that plays like a guitar. So once they offered me this slot in the band, as I said, they had some basses from other brands that we were using on the recording, and the 5th string never sounded right.
Yeah.
So, you know, the first thing which I wanted to do when it was like, okay, I need to figure out what my rig's going to be, was let's see what Dingwall are doing. They were doing the combustion model, the import model. And I think, I'm not speaking out of turn to say that it wasn't attracting the same fan base. They weren't really getting the number of sales they wanted, because so many people wanted the Canadian custom built basses. They had like the exquisite Prima range. They had like, you know, your basses and the Z basses. And I think the combustion hadn't quite found its audience yet. But for me, it was like, perfect. Yeah. I don't have that much money. I'm going to play in a metal band. I'm going to tour these things. I want a bass that's 2 bits of wood bolted together. And, you know, those had a basic just treble and bass preamp, plastic knobs. but they had obviously the fan frets and the long scale, and it was,
Yeah.
I made a beeline to the London bass show where Sheldon was, and I tried the combustion that he had there, and it was like instantly, a bit like you described with your bass, your Frankenstein, when you first put it together, it was like, yep, that does the thing. You can hear it even acoustically. Fifth string sounds brilliant, and there and then it was like, okay, 2 of these, a dark glass pedal, which was kind of a company that was coming out at the time.
Yeah.
And I played those for a couple of years before it seemed like the combustion was finding its market in the metal kind of sphere. Like you were seeing, I wasn't the first person by any means, but more and more people were interested in that bass. And it seemed like I had something to do with popularizing that. So I spoke to Sheldon, like, oh, maybe we could do like something. And I really wanted the pickup position like you have, the 2 pickups next to each other, which the original combustion didn't have. They had the kind of J-bass spacing.
Yeah.
So I said, like, can we do a cheaper combustion level instrument that has that? And maybe a slightly thinner neck. They didn't end up changing the neck, they just changed the radius.
Oh, okay.
And by changing it so it was a bit more radius, actually it kind of pulls down the edges. So, again, like with the fret wire, it's amazing how fractional changes make it
just a
really
hair changes it completely.
Completely, doesn't it? So we tested a couple of different fretboard materials out. We ended up settling on maple. The rosewood one, which we tried, like, I find that more with basses and with guitars, actually, the timbre, and especially on the neck, makes quite a noticeable audible difference. Yeah. And the maple had just like the really kind of bright, zingy sound that I wanted. It sounded like a maple J-bass kind of thing. And the deal was done. I mean, it was very easy. A bit like you were describing, I think, off camera. Like the instrument was already there.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah. So
it's just nuances and little setup and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And having had the contact with Dark Glass, I thought it could be cool to see if they'd do a preamp. They were doing their bass pedals. They had a EQ section on them. I didn't see why they couldn't do an onboard EQ section. Yeah. It was something they were interested in doing. So it was like, well, maybe we can make that, for this bass. So this bass kind of harnesses the power of the Dark Glass kind of exposure that we're getting. They were really, really sought after pedals even in the early days. So Dark Glass preamp, the 2 pickups next to each other, the carbon fiber guard, which resonated really well with Sheldon, who's really into his cars and racing and all that stuff. And so that was the original NG. I think my only stipulation, the thing I really didn't want to do was have my name too visibly on it. So we just went with putting it on the back plate. And I think that served well because this instrument, you see it getting played in loads of different contexts. In fact, I think Tony Levin played one in a music video, which is mind blowing. I don't think it's anything to do with me as much as a cool kind of blue bass. And I guess a bit similar to your basses, we stuck with solid colors as well. Something which isn't going to look dated.
Yeah, I'm not looking for flash or anything. They're just something that looks cool.
Exactly.
Because the one, my main bass is kind of a toned down that color. It's kind of a pale gold. Right. And all these people go, oh, I love your goldy bass. You go, fine, whatever you want to call it. It's interesting seeing like the tree at the top.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's something, that's all Dingwall. That wasn't my stipulation.
Because I've never had that on any of the basses.
I'm trying to see if there's much difference geometrically between us. It looks like, your, is that a scarf neck joint on yours or a single piece? Yeah, it looks like the headstock angle isn't. Yeah. This is a flat headstock.
Yeah, and this one tilts back a little bit.
I guess that's why.
Yeah, the only thing that I do on mine too, the only stipulation I have is I always have a 40 G string.
Okay.
Anything 45 or anything like that, because I like to wiggle.
Sure.
And as soon as but other than that, I've never really had any stipulations about gauge or anything like that. Sure. It seems like everything I've ever gotten from them works.
It's designed for them. It makes sense.
They know what they're doing.
I also play with a really light pick.
Okay.
Which is interesting. I think lots of people think if you're a pick player, you need to play with a really heavy pick.
Yeah.
But this really helps me get that sound of like the very kind of raspy kind of sound off the string. And I'm pushing the string down a lot, so it's hitting the frets. That's kind of why I was asking a little bit about yours in that. It's a little bit almost like a slapped note kind of.
But but slapping you can get closer to the tailpiece with the picks. So
yeah, exactly.
You get more clarity on that.
So I mean, it's about getting that close down and up to be as consistent as possible. Yeah. Because so much of the playing in Periphery is actually solid 8ths and 16ths through choruses or whatever. It's very rare for me to just be bringing notes out. It's all And so it's just like, can you sit exactly in the pocket, doing up and down strokes, and you know the level is coming out just looking completely even.
It's an art to that. It really is.
Yeah, but I think similarly to you, it's just enough repetition of that,
Yeah.
and it just becomes part of your muscle memory. It's how you play
it's
the
in your
instrument.
Rolodex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, well, this has been such a pleasure. It's been so lovely to meet you. And
Thank
thank
you
you
what
for
a treat this is.
Oh, mate, well, me too.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming all the way out to my neck of the woods to do it as well. I know it was a bit of a schlep.
It's not suffering to come out here.
No, I mean we can't complain, can
No,
we?
it's spectacular. But thank you, Sheldon,
Yeah, thank
for
you.
everything, man.